Welcome to Hence the Future podcast. This is Mattimore Cronin, and today we're discussing the future of mindfulness. With us today is Paul Teodo. Paul is a yogi, a meditation teacher, and a musician, and he's the yogi who originally got me really interested in yoga, mindfulness, and meditation through the classes that he taught in LA. And since then, Paul has moved from LA to Bali, and I've had the pleasure of going on 2 retreats with him so far. And I found that of all the yogis that I've been to in LA and elsewhere, the meditation style that Paul uses and also the pointers that you give, especially during Savasana, have really resonated with me the most. And I think that that may also be the case for our listeners. So thank you, Paul, for being on the podcast.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
Yeah, I know it's been a while since I've seen
I
you.
know.
Awesome. Yeah. So in today's episode, I want to talk about the why, the how, and the what of mindfulness. So why is mindfulness something that people should strive for? How do people go about obtaining it? And what are some of the benefits, some of the manifestations, some of the different styles that people can choose from?
Yeah.
But first, I think maybe it'd be good to give a little context on your own journey with mindfulness and meditation. So when did you first become interested in it, and how has that path manifested itself so far?
Yeah. Well, I would say, I used to, I've answered this question differently over the
Right.
last couple of years as I've really begun to understand what meditation means to me more and more and more. And then I really say that I was introduced to meditation when I was a teenager, because I feel that once I'm a musician,
Mm-hmm.
and once I was able to play guitar well enough that I could play without thinking, I was meditating.
Interesting.
So yeah, that's what one of my teachers is, Dr. Lauren Roche, and he
Hmm.
basically says any activity that you love so much that you can lose track of time and lose yourself in the activity. So basically, any of the arts,
Right.
it is a meditation. And they've actually done studies when a musician is playing an instrument, especially if they're improvising, the same parts of their brain are firing as when a meditator is sitting in meditation.
Hmm.
So I really consider my first meditations to be my jam sessions, probably when I was about 2 or 3 years in of playing guitar. I could play well enough that I was losing track of time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah,
It kind of reminds me of this other meditation teacher who talks about the first glimpse he had into that whole world was through
yeah.
sports, actually, where he heard that this sports announcer said he's got eyes in the back of his head. And that's sort of that being in the zone when you're playing sports. But I can imagine, being in the zone when you're playing music and you just sort of get lost. And I know Jimi Hendrix, for instance, talks about how it's almost like the music is playing through him and he's not even thinking about it at all. It's just flowing freely through him and through his guitar.
Absolutely. And I think that that's really true. If you talk to any musician that's played long enough to be able to get out of their own way, and there's just this level of execution that's happening that is beyond your intellect. It's something deeper,
Mm-hmm.
that we can't necessarily quantify. So yeah, I guess kind of coming back to like your original question, when did you start meditating? I would say that it really began there, but sports too. I was a basketball player and a football player. I never was able to go as deep into the zone in sports. I'm athletic, but not like a super athlete. So I think that is part of it too. You could definitely go into the zone there.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I would consider that was really my first foray into meditation. But then I started really examining meditation more seriously about 8 years ago, like as an
Hmm.
actual practice, and looking into it, and
And when did
sitting. But
yoga enter into that equation?
so yoga entered into the equation about 10 years ago. Um, and I originally was really attracted to yoga because of the physical benefits. Feeling both these classes in Los Angeles, which are very physically strong,
Hmm.
as you know, you used to
Yeah.
take my class, and but also I walked out of the room feeling really open and flexible.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I found about 10 years ago, I started taking yoga classes at Sports Club LA, which is now Equinox,
Right.
and and I really liked it. But then I went to Yoga Works on Main Street and took a few classes with some pretty senior teachers there. And one teacher, her name is Sarah Ivanhoe, and she went on to become
Mm.
a mentor of mine. She led us through this breathwork session in the middle at the end of her yoga class, and I literally had like an out of body experience where
Yeah.
it was incredible. Like
Satori.
I was, yeah, exactly. I had a moment of satori where I floated above my own body and was like watching myself sitting in a meditation, and I was just completely out of the body and just present, and
And you
it's not
said that
something
was
that
music, partly music that triggered that during her
no
class, or no? Was
no
there
it
like
was
a
breathing.
specific pointer, or was the breathing that
It was
that?
breathing.
Huh.
Yeah. So for me and for a lot of people that I know, sitting in meditation, you can go into deep states of consciousness, but breath work first, doing some type of pranayama,
Hmm.
that will usually activate it. Um, it's like a catalyst to go even deeper and to have these like um, really
Like
uh,
transcendental.
yeah, transcendental, almost psychedelic experiences. They
Yeah.
almost have always happened as a result of breath work and meditation. Um,
Interesting. So I've
yeah.
never had a transcendental experience through breath work, but I did have one on the Bali yoga retreat with you when it
Yeah,
was in
yeah, yeah.
Savasana, and it was one of those, I can't remember which song it was on your album, but there was this one period where there was just a long pause where there was no sound, and then like a strum came very strongly in an unexpected way that I wasn't expecting it, and it just felt like like my whole soul or self just like launched out into the cosmos, and it sounded kind of like the experience people have described with DMT, although I've never tried that, but it felt very out of body.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. That's incredible. I totally think you can have those experiences without breath work. I think I remember at the time you were also reading some pretty deep meditation books too. So you were
yeah,
definitely like you were preparing your brain for deeper levels of consciousness, and then you combine that with tons of yoga, and you combine it with being in Ubud and being surrounded by all
right.
these people, and
Yeah,
and the
there's
music, and then it all comes together to give you
yeah.
this experience.
It is
Yeah.
really interesting the different ingredients that go into that sort of experience. So I want to get into that when we get to the how, but I think first let's talk about the why, and especially I think you have a really unique perspective because you're someone who's lived in Bali and you've lived in
Hmm.
LA, so you can kind of see both sides of the coin, like the fast-paced LA lifestyle and then the more relaxed Eastern mindful lifestyle. And so I'm curious if you have any thoughts around what are the main motives of people who come on your retreats? Like, what are they seeking? What are the problems they're trying to solve? Like, what is it that drives people to seek mindfulness? And, also, what is it that you were seeking when you moved from LA to Bali?
Yeah, yeah. All great questions. I'll start with the first one. When people come on a retreat of mine, I would say that it's 50%, 50%. 50% of the people that are coming on the retreat are really they just need a vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're coming for a healthy vacation, a vacation where they're not going to be drinking a lot of alcohol, a vacation where they're going to be exercising, taking care of themselves, and like
Right.
they just need that. And that's one thing that I've really seen more than anything else is you
Hmm.
see the difference between Americans and everybody else, because everybody else takes so much more vacation.
Wow.
Canadians, Australians, Europeans, so much more vacation. So when now that I have these retreats and these trainings where the Americans are coming, I really now that I've seen like all these other countries, if they're like, I just want a vacation, I'm like, you know what, man, do it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like getting
Yeah.
an American to go anywhere for 10 days is like,
Right.
and they have all this anxiety about like leaving home just for 10 days. And
Yeah.
it's very
Emails and
normal. Yeah.
yeah.
It's very normal in like in Australia or, you know, Germany or Scandinavia or even Canada for people to leave for like 3 weeks or a month and for their employer to be like, leave and like go and
Right.
have fun and come back energized. So that's something that I've seen. So half the people that come on my retreats are really just looking for a vacation and they need it.
Mm-hmm.
So I let whatever is supposed to happen with them happen organically, and then
Right.
the other half are really looking to like deepen their practice, like to come,
Yeah.
yeah, and have an experience and to go from somebody who maybe practices yoga to somebody who might want to do a teacher training or somebody who wants to do more workshops, and then they go home maybe wanting to read books on philosophy, um,
Yeah.
and to develop a meditation practice that's consistent, that they're doing almost like an exercise practice, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
four or
It's
five times a week,
it's
maybe
funny.
even
My
more.
you remember Martin, my
Yeah,
cousin
yeah.
Martin. Yeah. So he just called me right before this, just out of the blue, and he said that he recommended your retreats to one of his friends. I can't remember his name, but
Yeah, they came to class.
yeah, he
Yeah.
went to one of yours, and then he went on another one since then because it just really unlocked something for him that he hadn't had before. So I definitely think a lot of people, myself included, you can sort of level up on the dimensional plane where you look at your former self and it's almost amusing at,
Yeah.
some of the quagmires that you found yourself in previously that you're now able to get out of. Um,
Absolutely. Well, one thing that I always say in my yoga classes is every single person is very intelligent when they're calm,
mm,
and we're all stupid when we're full of stress and fear and anger and anxiety. Like you're stupid. You may
right.
like you respond to life stupidly. You
Yeah,
know?
so even if your motive is, I want to be the most successful American businessman possible, even
Yeah.
then it makes sense to pursue mindfulness because there are countless studies that show that when you're mindful, you're able to perform at a much higher level cognitively and physically and in all aspects.
Yeah, and you'll be able to like do your job and hopefully enjoy it. I mean, I would hope that if your goal is to become a super like successful multimillionaire businessman, your goal would hopefully be to also enjoy the journey of becoming that. And if
Right,
you don't, like, what's the freaking point?
right.
What's the point? I mean, because it's not an easy thing to build a multi-million dollar business. So you might as well make the choice to enjoy it. Like I used to be an actor, and there was the George Clooney said like he caught himself once. He was on set for some movie, and he was like complaining and being like miserable and like just the typical like nothing's working out, blah blah blah. And he had this aha moment where it's like, wait, I had this dream life. Like
Right.
I'm a movie star. Like what am I complaining about? And from that moment on, he just made the decision like I'm going to enjoy the journey because I've been given a life that's like a blessing. And that's mindfulness to me. It's not even just
Right.
It's not just meditating. It's these aha moments where our perception is deepened, and we're realizing our own insanity. Where it's like you're a movie star and you're sitting here and you're complaining about having a life that 0.01% of the planet will ever have a life of this quality.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was something that I don't know if you saw Dave Chappelle's recent Netflix special, but he talks about how Anthony Bourdain likewise had externally the most successful career you could possibly imagine. I mean, this guy was traveling around the world,
Yeah.
getting paid boatloads of money to just live his life in these amazing places, and then he committed suicide. So it's very clear that no matter how good your external life is, it's really the internal life that determines your happiness and fulfillment. And it
Yeah.
reminds me also of this quote from Sadhguru, who I know you love, who you actually were the one who got
Yeah.
me into him. But he
Yeah.
talks about how, what is well-being? He says, well-being is a deep sense of pleasantness within. If your body feels pleasant, we call this health. If your mind feels pleasant, we call this peace. If your emotions are pleasant, we call this love. And,
Yeah.
and it's just like, that really is what it all comes down to, is cultivating this sense of pleasantness or peacefulness in all aspects of your life.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And why not? And in order to do that, I think especially after the ages of like your early 20s, mid 20s, you have to develop tools. Like it doesn't
Hmm.
just like the world will kind of will put its pressures on you, and if you don't have tools to be able to respond to life with emotional maturity and mental clarity, you just start to accumulate, as they say in yoga. So you start to accumulate all this dukkha, and
Mm.
dukkha is basically stress. But I love the description for dukkha, is like it's a feeling of being squeezed, which
Mm.
I think is great, or being shrunken. So
Right.
the idea here is that if you don't learn how to respond to life intelligently, life will shrink you.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think that's a really beautiful metaphor,
Oh, for
you
sure.
know?
I mean, a friend in my life recently had a panic attack, and he described it as it felt like the whole world was closing in on him, and he had shortness of breath, and he felt trapped like a caged
Yeah,
animal. And if you
yeah,
contrast that to what some of these meditation teachers describe as spaciousness, like inner spaciousness, conscious awareness, like it's a feeling of expansion, a feeling of totality, and that's like the perfect antidote if you are feeling that sense of being trapped or helpless or
yeah,
constrained with dukkha.
yeah, absolutely. And then also just recognizing, I think the misconception sometimes is, these tools, they do take time to develop.
Hmm.
And, and it's not all rosy either,
Right.
because you take somebody who's already quite sensitive and perceptive, perhaps like an Anthony Bourdain or a Robin Williams,
Mm.
and you give them a meditation practice, and they are going to be able to calm the mind, and they are going to be able to find levels of peace. But then when you go out into the world, you're going to be just as much more sensitive to the suffering of the world as
Hmm.
you are to the beauty of the world. So developing a meditation practice is not a one-way ticket to love and peace. It's a one-way ticket to deeper levels of truth within yourself. And then you have to learn to be able to handle that as well.
Right.
Because when I started practicing, I remember reading Eckhart Tolle's books, and at first I had these incredible moments of bliss, and I had an experience at a park, Temescal Canyon Park, where it was a definite like out of body, incredible uh, like rush of bliss that lasted for a few days, and then the opposite happened. I actually spent
Hmm.
a good amount of time being really unhappy because I was just so much more tuned into the suffering and the insanity of humanity.
Right.
And
It feels like
so
Jim
it's like,
Carrey has gone through that recently.
yes, it sure seems like it. Yeah, like both sides of it. you know?
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, one thing that struck me when I came to Bali is I would talk to the Balinese people and they'd say, "Oh, why are you here?" And I'd say, "Oh, I'm at a yoga retreat." And they'd say, "Oh, I do yoga all the time." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Really?" But what
Yeah.
they mean is not physical yoga like hatha yoga. They mean yoga of the mind because
Yeah.
it's so ingrained in their culture to practice mindfulness that it's just like another tool, like you were saying. But in the
Yeah.
West, there's just no sense of that. I mean, I guess maybe now they're starting to teach it in schools, but certainly when I was growing up, there was no mindfulness training, no meditation, nothing like that growing up in the culture.
No, no. It's really beautiful that a lot of the more modern and progressive schools are starting to um, teach kids how to meditate, and the effects that they're having for these kids. If you look up some of the studies, it's just incredible. Like, I think there's a couple schools that implemented meditation as part of like the detention program. So if you get sent to detention,
Oh, yeah, I
you'll
did read
actually
about
like
that.
yeah, you'll have to meditate, and a lot of times they'll teach these kids to like breathe their anger out of their system.
Hmm.
And what a positive way. Like otherwise, what are they gonna do? You're gonna sit in detention and just be angry.
Right.
But it's like might as well go sit with the teacher who's gonna be like, okay, um, we're gonna spend this time like paying attention to your breath and identifying where your anger is inside of your body, and then directing your breath to displace that anger until it's gone. And that's a tool that you can use the rest of your life.
Right.
And especially to teenagers who are full of hormones and reactivity and still very emotionally open because they have the emotional openness of a child, but then they're
Right.
developing all of these adult hormones, and you combine those two and they can be very reactive.
Yeah, I mean, I know like the first couple times your ego gets shattered as a young teenager, whether it's because
Yeah.
the girl doesn't say yes when you ask her out or whatever it is, it's like it feels like the world's gonna end because you have no practice in dealing with it.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
if you
yeah.
were taught maybe early on, whether it's detention or school or whatever, you might be able to deal with it better.
Yeah. And even if you were to look at getting sent to detention as an opportunity for you to go sit and release anger and release fear,
Right.
because again, like I said, like what happens is we don't know how to get rid of our anger, our fear, our ego, so it sits inside of us and creates this feeling of being squeezed. And then what
Yeah.
happens is we lash out, and that's what usually makes a child end up in detention. But
Right.
if they're able to learn how to not allow that dukkha to accumulate within themselves, then the natural tendency for all human beings is to respond to life intelligently. And if that's I think if we can do anything, it's how do we get more human beings to be able to have the tools to be able to respond to life intelligently?
Yeah.
And you know,
It's so much better than just typically in detention you're building up your egoic defenses and building on itself until at a certain point it just bursts.
yeah,
But
it's not solving any problems. Like,
right.
yeah,
I mean, I
you know.
noticed that in some yoga classes with you early on where you would give these pointers in Savasana to just say, relax the corners of your mouth, relax the muscles around your eyes, relax the muscles around your forehead. And like the first couple of times I heard that, I was like, wow, I didn't even realize that I'm holding all this tension just all day. And as soon as
Yeah,
you relax that and you just let go and surrender, all of a sudden, it may be a swelling of emotions that come up, or
yeah,
it may be a release of those emotions, but you realize how much is pent up when you finally allow yourself to just surrender and relax.
yeah, totally, dude. I've found, the more and more people that I work with, and the more I work on myself, that a lot of times people will have like, oh man, my nose is so stuffed up, and I'm like, all right, well, why don't you lay in meditation and soften the four corners of your eyes and soften your forehead, and usually within like 5 minutes, they're actually able to breathe more easily, and they don't actually even have a cold. It's like they're
Right.
squeezing that. People are sitting in front of computers 6 7 hours a day, and every time that they experience stress, they squeeze their face. You're squeezing your forehead, you're squeezing the four corners of your eyes, and all of that is going directly towards the bridge of your nose, basically. So you have all this pressure that's being created, and you end up like you can't breathe through one of your nostrils, or maybe even through both of your nostrils. And I
Hmm.
can, a lot of times, I'll work with a client and I'll guide them through a meditation to soften around that area. And they'll be like, oh, wait, I don't even have a cold. It's just stress.
That's
Like they
fascinating.
think that they have some sort of cold. You think
Right.
they have like a virus. It's just stress. And it's squeezing. It's creating dukkha.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'd love to talk a little bit now about the how, because it's so clear that meditation is the antidote for so many problems with modern life, especially in LA, especially in places where, like in America, like you said, it's this sort of workaholic culture where you feel like you can't take 10 days off because you're just dreading the amount of emails that will pile up, and you build up all of these scenarios, and you're not living in the present. So I guess, imagine that some of our listeners have no experience with meditation or mindfulness, and a lot of our listeners are younger, like Gen Z and millennials. What
Nice.
would you say to them as far as how they should go about cultivating mindfulness in their own life? And then maybe after we talk about some of that, we can, go through a brief little meditation practice of how you
Yeah,
would
yeah, yeah.
lead a beginner.
Yeah. Well, okay, this is great. So there's both beautiful things happening with meditation and things happening that aren't, that in my opinion, they're more stepping stones. So if most of the if most of your user or your listeners are younger, I would say, you know, Headspace and these apps. There's a new one that my girlfriend is on, and her it's called Balance, and it's by the same people who created Elevate, which is an IQ boosting app.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
yeah, it's really awesome. It's yeah. So Balance, check it out.
Yeah.
It's a great meditation app. But these are supplemental. Like
Mm.
they're a great way to get into meditation. They're a great way to learn how to create space in between your thoughts. But meditation is not something that you're supposed to be experiencing through a machine.
Hmm.
It's like it's something you're supposed to be experiencing through your five senses, and by filtering it through a machine, you can only go so far. So I found meditation through YouTube videos at first,
Hmm.
like 10, 11 years ago, um,
Any
and I
teacher
was
in
able.
particular?
No, I would actually, because I'm a musician, I would just go to like meditation music or
Oh.
chakra clearing meditations. It was actually I actually sometimes prefer unguided, that it's just music or it's
Hmm.
just tones or binaural beats. Do you know what those are? Binaural
Yeah.
beats?
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. Um, so it was a great way to get started, and I was able to, at times, go into deep states of consciousness, but it wasn't repeatable because I wasn't working with somebody who I could ask questions and talk to. Um, so the good thing that's happening with meditation is that now that it's becoming more popular and more mainstream, there's all these apps that are popping up that are really helping people get started. But it's like it's how you get started. It's like if
Hmm.
you wouldn't never go to a yoga class. Like you start practicing yoga online, you start practicing yoga on YouTube, and then eventually you have to go learn yoga from a person,
Right.
face to face. And it's the same thing with meditation. So that's the one thing that I do that does worry me, because meditation has this, my old acting teacher called it a disguised virtuosity,
Hmm.
which means that it looks really easy when somebody is meditating and they're in a deep state. It looks effortless, but to get to that level where it's effortless took thousands of hours of practice. The same thing as
Right.
acting. You see Meryl Streep acting and it looks effortless, but what she's doing is incredibly challenging.
Right. Or a
Um,
musician.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the disguised virtuosity. So the thing with meditation is that it is our body's natural state is to be in a state of calm and peace, but to be able to develop the tools where you can get there consistently, it takes thousands of hours of practice and a real, a commitment to studying with a teacher and learning, um, and really committing to it with consistency. So,
Yeah. I mean,
um,
even just feeling the energy in the room where everyone is meditating is really powerful.
yes.
And I heard this one meditation teacher, they'll actually do exercises where they'll all focus on putting their awareness in one corner of the room, and
Hmm.
then they'll try to look back at where that awareness came from. And but that's like a more advanced practice, but it's just interesting to sort of play with the energies and see how much you can feel where that conscious awareness is located from.
Yeah, yeah,
um,
absolutely.
but yeah, I mean, I think early on, at least for me, focusing on the breath was a really good way to start. And I know you've also led meditations that focus on sound, and there's really any of the senses you can focus in on. But what would you
Yep.
say is a good way to start? Like if you were to lead just like a few minutes of meditation, maybe you can just give a progression of how that would start to get someone to a state of conscious awareness.
Sure. Well, it's different. Like one of my teachers, Dr. Lauren Roach, who I'm just such a big fan of him. He taught myself and he taught Leia, my fiance. If you get an opportunity to work with somebody one-on-one, you can ask them questions so you can kind of get a feel for their personality
Mm-hmm.
and what type of a meditation would best suit them. And then also that the type of meditation that you do will change from time to
Right.
time. So
So what are the
if
main
you're,
types, would you say?
yeah. Great question. So one of the most popular is mantra. Mantra meditation is basically what TM is. So transcendental meditation and Vedic meditation is you sit in stillness and you're not necessarily paying attention to the breath. You're just repeating a word or a mantra. So even like in a lot of Western yoga classes or meditation classes, they'll have you say like let go.
Hmm.
So you're just sitting there, you're breathing, and you're saying like let go, and then you exhale, let go, exhale. And then if it's more traditional, you'd repeat a word like Ram or Soham, which means I am, or I am in English.
Hmm.
Or there's one Hrim or Krim. There's all of these. They call it a bija seed. It's a seed mantra. And it's literally like like a seed, like you're planting a seed, and then you just repeat the mantra over and over again, and eventually the mantra will replace the voice in your head, and then
Hmm.
you start to create more and more space in between your thoughts. So that's mantra, and that's really good for a lot of business people use it, a lot of highly people that are very identified with their intellect. So if you're a very left brain person, you're very much like, and if you're a very smart left brain person, you have been rewarded since probably you were a little kid for using the voice in your head.
Hmm.
And this is why a lot of like really smart people are very unhappy because they don't know how to turn it off. They don't
Mm-hmm.
know how to create space. So mantra would be a great one for somebody who's highly intellectual, which a lot of like TM um,
Right.
is used by people who are very wealthy and very smart and very successful, which these people usually are very intelligent as well. So that's why mantra works well for them. So what that'll do is that'll create space in between your thoughts. But it doesn't necessarily do is it doesn't work on reducing tension in your body, which is like the other huge half of meditation. It's like, what do you
Right.
have? You have tension in your body, and you have a voice in your head that won't shut the hell up. And you have to learn how to develop techniques that can work on both sides of that.
Right.
So the
So that
one
would
that
be
would
more
work.
like Vipassana the surrender, or is there another one that you think is better for getting into that surrender state?
Well, I think that there's two sides of it. So, with regards to what they would call both feminine and masculine, we all have like a masculine and a feminine side to us. The masculine side of us that's learning to reduce tension in the body would sit in perhaps a vipassana, or sit and just pay attention to breath, or do a body scan. A body scan would be like you direct your awareness to
Oh,
specific parts of the body that are
I love
feeling.
that one. I do that one all the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So body scan is great, but these are more masculine versions of meditation. And the masculine version of the meditation is like, I'm going to sit still and I'm
Hmm.
going to breathe until this tension is gone.
Right.
And that's great, but it's masculine. So masculine, not meaning like man or woman, it just means like the essence of it
Right.
is more masculine. The feminine version of that would be, I'm just going to put on some music and dance for 10 minutes until
Mm.
this tension is gone. And both of those work incredibly well. And the second side of it, the feminine side of it, is something that's neglected a lot. So one thing that our teacher would tell us to do is, like, particularly if you get a very feminine woman and she's like, I just can't sit still and breathe into my body. I'm like, well, yeah, just put on some music and dance for 10 minutes. Like, that's your meditation.
Yeah. That's
Shake it
fascinating
out.
because I remember we did one class, I think it was in Fiji, where we did the masculine feminine class, and
Yeah.
all of the men were supposed to really harness their masculine energy and be okay with being a little bit competitive and with holding your poses long and with really feeling this inner strength within,
Yeah.
where the women in the class were focused on free flowing, being in tune with their sensuality and curvaceousness and all of that. And
Yeah.
I found that I felt great afterwards. And I also found it interesting that one of the people on the retreat was asking you, saying, Paul, like, how I can't find a man. What am I doing wrong? And you were
Yeah.
basically saying it's important to be in tune with your feminine energy, or for a man to be in tune with your masculine energy,
Yeah.
especially because in society, American society especially, men tend to suppress their masculine energy because there's so much in the news and media about how horrible it is to be a man,
Yes.
and then on the female side, to be a career woman and to have it all and succeed in your career, it's seen that you need to suppress your feminine energy a little bit and be more like a male businessman. And so on
Yeah.
both sides, it seems like people could use a little bit more being in tune with their sexuality and their their energies. And so that I thought
Yeah.
that was something I hadn't experienced before, but I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and you're it's totally true. And you're looking at like this society that we're in right now, and how that is like, a woman is encouraged to be masculine. A woman is like, this is great. Like you're out like now working a 12-hour day. Like, you can do the thing like that a man can
Hmm.
do. You can go out and you can have that six-figure lawyer career, and that's great. But then it's very challenging, I find, or what I see in a lot of my classes, is these types of women, men aren't attracted to them, and and a lot of times they're like, it's because they're intimidated by me because I make a lot of money. I'm like, no, that's not it. That's because you're not dancing. It's because you're not having
Hmm.
fun. It's because you've forgotten how to dress sexy, like not for a man, but for yourself, like
Hmm.
to dress feminine, and to be in that spontaneous, flowy, which is what men need. That's a compliment to a man, and to have a woman who is vulnerable and spontaneous and gentle and nurturing. And the world doesn't teach women to be that anymore. It teaches them,
Hmm.
like you said, to go out and to go out and make money, to go out and have a career. And all of these amazing things have come from that. But at what point do we say, okay, like, we have to pull the pendulum back just a little bit? And like you said too, with men, because of all of this toxic masculinity, which I agree totally exists,
Hmm.
men are now like, it's like they're clipping their own testosterone. It's like,
Yeah.
no, like, imagine if LeBron James wasn't competitive.
Right.
What would he be able to do? Like, and what that man has done for inner city youth and the schools that he's built and the money that he's given to charity. And not only that, like, just how many kids would watch a basketball game, and instead of going out and getting into trouble after watching him, they go outside and they play basketball. And
Right.
if that man wasn't competitive, he would have nothing.
Yeah.
Like, there's no, the talent would not be able to rise to the surface without the competitiveness. So it's really about, like, honoring your competitiveness and saying, where are healthy places for me to practice this, you know?
Right. Yeah, and this actually gets at another Sadhguru quote, which is sort of takes this into account, where this idea of the distinction between bad and good, which is really an illusory distinction. So here's the
Yeah.
quote. He says, "The reason why everyone is not naturally enlightened is simply this. People have categorized the world into good and bad, God and devil, high and low, sacred and filthy. These are parallel lines that will never meet. Once you had fractured this existence within yourself, there is no way to reach a stage of enduring well-being and freedom. You have been told to love your enemy. If you first label someone your enemy and then try to love him, it's going to be torturous." But
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that idea because really it gets at this very prevalent concept in meditation, which is the non-dual. Because I know, at least in my own experience growing up, everything was about dualism, like good
Hmm.
and bad, and especially growing up as a Catholic, it was all about suppressing the bad, and
Yeah.
similar with masculine and feminine. But I think getting to this notion of seeing that they're all part of the same whole is one of the ways out. Like the way out is in by
Yes.
realizing that. So I guess I wanted to ask you, how do you view progress in meditation? Like, do you see that there are stages along the path for meditation, or maybe with yourself? Like, how do you view the different stages? And I can give you an example. So one, Jack Kornfield, who's a meditator, has said that there's three stages. There's absence of self, then there's the feeling of being the awareness, and
Hmm.
then there's actually being cognizant of where you are aware from. And that sort of gets into the, like, moving your awareness to the corner of the room, or moving it throughout your body. And that's just one model of stages in progress. But I'm curious if you have a different view on stages of progress in meditation, or if you think that it can be
Well,
spontaneous.
yeah, I agree with all of that, what Jack Kornfield just said. But I think the thing that you kind of alluded to, and the thing that Carl Jung used to really talk about, was that the way to real liberation is going directly into the darkest parts of your soul.
Hmm.
And Carl Jung said, no tree can reach heaven unless its roots go all the way down to hell. And I love that
Wow,
quote.
I
It's
like
so
that.
vivid. Yeah, it's so vivid. And so the thing that you don't see a lot in, like, Instagram memes and whatever is, like, like, you need to make peace with the devil inside of you, and to
Right.
really recognize that within every human being, and John Lennon said this, within every human being is Jesus Christ and Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
And every single one of us has the capacity. And once you can understand that within yourself, you can learn to not respond to life with the darkness.
Right.
So, like you said, like, I don't think there's good or evil. There's just balance or out of balance. And
Yeah.
if the competitiveness is out of balance, it's toxic masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
On the other side of that, if your sensitivity is out of balance as a woman, you're not going to be able to function as a woman, or as a feminine, as a person very
Mm-hmm.
much in their feminine. Even like artists, like, if you're a very sensitive, feminine, artistic person, and you don't learn how to take care of that, the world is going to smash you.
Right.
Like, and it does that to artists. And I know I'm a musician, like it does that. It almost did it to me. I spent several years miserable and in states of anxiety and depression, and
Yeah.
I was unable to function in the world. But at the same time, I was very conscious. Like I was very sensitive. I was very tuned into nature. And then when you're tuned into all these things, and then you see something happening that's disturbing, it just destroys you.
Yeah, I mean the greatest possible fear that people have is what Alan Watts calls the screaming memes, which is
Yeah,
basically
yeah,
like, what's the worst possible thing that could happen? It's like you're in a hospital bed with tubes and just unimaginable pain, but even that is impermanent. Even that will pass. And if you
yeah,
can not be so anxious about those possible futures coming one day, then and realizing their impermanence, which is another big stage along the enlightenment path, then it really liberates you, where you don't have to have all this anxiety for the future or depression in the past, and you can really just operate at full functional awareness in your
yeah,
day-to-day moments.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's all true. And I think getting back to the original question about like how would you determine progress? And I think progress really at first it's just um, being able to relax enough that usually you'll have some moments of peace.
Hmm.
And then what'll happen is you'll have some moments of deep release where you'll either cry or you'll let go of like a big chunk of anger, or just something will happen.
Or start
And
laughing
yeah,
crazily.
start
Yeah.
laughing, and then what a lot of people do is like, oh, okay, like I released all this anger, that's great. But the next step is, how do I hold myself accountable to recognize the decisions that I made to allow that amount of anger to get stuck inside of me for that long? So meaning like, okay, where are my blind spots here? Oh, I'm arrogant. Oh, I'm dishonest. Oh,
Right.
but we're a lot of times within the spiritual community, we're being told that we're perfect. And I don't think that that's like a good, you don't want a bunch of people walking around being like, I'm perfect. Like
Right.
how are you going to work on yourself? Like I don't consider myself perfect. And it's through like wanting to dive into my own shadow that I've really gained insight in my own life. And then also that's given me the confidence to be able to go out into the world and teach meditation and teach
Hmm.
these things not because of the moments of bliss that I've gotten, but the moments where I've recognized, oh, like I used to have like ridiculous perfectionism. So, when I had all of this crazy anxiety and all of this crazy, um, all of this fear and all this dukkha, and then I released it, and then it came back, I was like, oh, I didn't actually work on any tools to be able to not allow all of that anxiety. And then I realized that it was my perfectionism.
Right. Yeah,
So
it's
I had to work on
interesting
the
you
perfectionism, you
yeah,
know?
it's interesting you use the term blind spots, because that's something I've also heard as a pointer in meditation practice, to not focus on your visual field, but focus on your blind spots. In other words, look back at the one who is looking, or
Yeah,
look for the thinker of thoughts, the doer of deeds, the observing awareness. There's all these different terms for it.
yeah.
But I'm curious if any, because you have so many good pointers in your yoga classes. I'm curious if you found any pointers that really helped you sort of unlock those moments of satori.
Yeah, yeah, it's happened. I've done so many meditations that, um, repeating the mantra Mu. It's a Zen mantra. I was able to go into. I was also sitting at the ocean, so the
Hmm.
ocean helped quite a bit. But that was able to really. I was imagining that the ocean waves were kind of just washing away my thoughts while repeating the mantra Mu, M-U, which is it's a Japanese meditation.
Hmm.
So I experienced a transcendental state there. I've experienced transcendental states while playing guitar, just completely jamming out. I've experienced transcendental states through breath work, which I've mentioned before, but
Right.
that's more like it's more in the body. Um, and then also through body scan,
Yeah.
through paying attention to specific parts. So basically, what happens is the more and more you practice meditation, and then for me, not just practice it, but teaching it.
Mm-hmm.
Teaching meditation made me a much better meditator because I
Mm.
had to like really be able to articulate these things for somebody like you,
Right.
and then get to know you. Like, oh, okay, so if Matt's having a day where his thoughts are going wild and his thoughts are racing, I'm going to give you some sort of a mantra meditation. But if
Mm-hmm.
you're having a day where I can see that your shoulders are jamming up towards your neck, or I can see that your breath is really short, then I'm going to have you go into your body.
Hmm.
And then if I have another thing where I can just tell you're being really rigid, I might give you some sort of a feminine meditation, something where I'm making you move and dance and be in your artistic side. And
Right.
that's
Yeah,
what
that's the
Dr.
real skill,
Mattimore.
is it's not like a one size fits all. It's really dependent on your current conscious
Yeah,
state or physical
yeah,
state as well.
yeah. And that's why I'm a big believer in uh, I don't prescribe to any one type of like this, like TM is the thing, or Zen
Right.
meditation is the thing, or Tantra meditation is it. It's like all of these things work, and you can overdo all of them. You get
Mm-hmm.
somebody who practices too much Zen meditation, they're going to completely cut off their own sexuality. Like they're not going to want to have sex. They're not going to like that. It's just going to go,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not a meditation that's designed to bring you into your own sexual energy.
Right.
So a lot of these meditations were designed by men who decided to leave the world and be celibate. And then you get people that are like, I don't want to leave the world and be celibate, but then they're practicing these meditations that are
Right.
designed for people who it's like, no, it's like you don't do that. You have to balance things out, you know?
And why is it that for many people, especially beginners, it's a lot easier to have these sort of states of mind if you're in a foreign land like, Bali or Fiji or somewhere like that? What is it about that that makes those experiences come more readily?
Well, because when you travel, you're present.
Mm.
When you're in a foreign environment, you're super present. So I think, it's like here's the word safety. So
Mm.
safety can have both a positive connotation and a negative connotation. I
Right.
think the masculine side of us looks at safe and thinks safe keeps me small. Safe keeps me from growing. Safe keeps me from stepping into a fear. Like play it safe, play it safe. Like that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of a negative connotation. But the feminine side of us is like, oh, I'm safe. I can relax. I can feel at home. So
Right.
when we're traveling, there's a combination of not feeling safe, which makes us very present because you're in this foreign environment, and then going into like a place where it's designed to make you feel relaxed, then feeling extremely safe,
Oh,
and
fascinating.
allowing all of that just to unfold and to happen. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
totally, totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what do you view, because we're still in sort of the how to achieve this levels of mindfulness. Do you view psychedelics as being helpful at all along this path? Did it help you along your path at all, or do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, yeah, I think they do help.
Yeah,
And I also don't want to tell anybody, you know,
like you should
um,
do it because it's
yeah,
dependent on the type of person and situation and all that. But
yeah, and then it's because psychedelics can also be like it's like a catalyst for the ego too.
you could
What
reify your experience.
oh my God, what I see so much of is like the 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 Northern California like Silicon Valley guy who worked at Facebook and was making 300 grand a
Like
year.
microdosing every day.
Yeah, microdosing or micro or whatever, and then like goes and has a weekend doing a bunch of ayahuasca and then like quits his job at Facebook and like wants to become a shaman, but actually has no real, hasn't actually studied.
Right,
Like you just,
right.
all you did was get high, man. It's
Yeah, well, this gets
like
at a
you just,
really interesting distinction because you said something at the beginning of this episode about how it's important to be reading the right literature, have the right base of knowledge so that you can actually make sense of these glimpses at enlightenment when they do occur. So it seems like it's not just about getting into the right state of mind, it's also about knowing how to make sense of that state of mind.
making it repeatable.
Right. And that was, I mean, that's been the biggest thing that I've been working towards is I've had glimpses, but they've never been deliberate. And now I'm working towards deliberately having those sorts of experiences through, deliberate mindfulness and meditation.
Yeah.
Um,
But then that's you see that's the trap, is to think that, oh, if I have this, like the experience that you had in Bali, like that's awesome, and I'm so glad that you had that psychedelic experience, and the experience that I had in Sarah's class and when I did ayahuasca and mushrooms, and those are all great, but really how I changed my life was by meditating every day and getting
hmm.
to a calm enough state to be like, oh, I'm a perfectionist. And
Right,
I can,
right.
oh, I can be really arrogant. Like,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
you're grounded in reality, and then you go out into the world and you learn to respond less arrogantly, less perfectionistically.
Right,
And what a lot of people do is they're just looking for the mystical experience because it's
right,
a
right.
high. It's a high and it's great, but it's just a high. And
Yeah,
if you don't actually go back and integrate that into your life and make permanent changes, then you just go through this cycle of like having this psychedelic experience and then going back to all your unhealthy behaviors and all your unhealthy patterns and then having another psychedelic experience and then and you're riding this
right.
wave of like one unhealthy relationship after another, or one unfulfilling career opportunity after another, where you're not actually like
Yeah.
shifting, you
Well,
know?
one thing that you said was interesting to me about how you realized you were a perfectionist. And this sort of gets at one misconception that I've seen, which is that if you become enlightened, you lose your personality. Like you basically just
No.
become this empty vessel. But it seems like what's closer to the truth is that you just don't take things personally. Like you're able to recognize that you have certain traits of your personality, but that doesn't reflect in any way on how you feel because you realize that there is no thinker of thoughts, that there is just this spaciousness within each of us that is much closer to the truth. So it's misidentification with yourself rather than totally obliterating your personality. And because I have heard what some people are hesitant about the mindfulness path for that reason.
Oh yeah, and that's one of the biggest misconceptions, is that like to become a spiritual person, so many people are like, I need to obliterate my ego, which means
Hmm.
I need to repress my personality, or I have to shame myself for having sexual thoughts, wanting to make money, being competitive, like all of these things, having a sense of humor. Like some
Hmm.
people even take it that far, where like they destroy their sense of humor. Like, what
Right.
does that have to do with being enlightened? What does that have to do with being happy if your sense of humor is gone, your sexuality is gone? Like how is that? Like how are you going to be any happier? So
Right.
it's like I think, and again, this goes back to like what I was talking. All of these books were written by men who decided to withdraw from the world, go and live in caves, and have no job, no wife, no responsibilities, and and if that's your aim, then eventually I think you can get to a certain level of peace and happiness, but you're not trying to live in the world. Whereas like a
Hmm.
lot of people, like they're reading all these books and then they're trying to live in the world, and then they just end up hating themselves because like, oh man, like I'm having sexual thoughts, or oh man, like I'm focused on like making money, or oh, like I'm
Right.
competitive or
Yeah, it's more
whatever.
just about letting those thoughts arise and without judgment, letting them pass away again. Like I've heard one person described it as when you're truly mindful, when thoughts arise, it's like thieves coming into an empty house. Like, yeah, the
Yeah,
thoughts still arise, but then they leave just as quickly as they arise, and you know the worse off for it.
that's a great quote. Yeah, thieves. Yeah, going into an empty house. Yeah. And
Yeah,
I think that like another thing too is like the more you can, the more you practice, the more you're going to start to really appreciate simplicity uh, in in every aspect of your life. You're going to want to make things just more simple,
yeah,
and through this simplicity, the quality of everything that we do goes up.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you're cool with it, I would love to hear you lead our listeners just through a brief meditation. It can just be like a minute or two, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
just to give them
Absolutely.
a taste of it.
Cool. Okay. So I'd like you to find yourself a comfortable seated position. And just be mindful of your posture. Notice if you're puffing the chest out or if you're slouching, and try to sit in a way that makes you feel confident. And without closing your eyes, without squeezing your eyes, gently close the eyes. And as you close the eyes, keep your eyes gazing slightly inward and upward. And begin to soften the center of your forehead, the space in between the eyebrows. And allow that softening to move outwards towards your temples. It might feel as if you're taking off a hat, releasing all this tension from the forehead. And begin to soften the four corners of your eyes. Soften your jaw. Soften the crown of your head. And as you're softening the skin on the top of your head, you might notice some tingling around your hair follicles and perhaps even slightly above your head. And for the next few moments, as the face and the head continue to relax more deeply, just pay attention to your breath as it's gently brushing up and down the center of your body. see if you can deepen the pause at the bottom of your exhale and just sit in emptiness for a few moments. From here, begin to open the eyes slowly. And take a second to just notice the softness you've created around your face. And just notice the space in between your thoughts.
Wow. That was great. First live meditation on this podcast.
Awesome.
I love the part about feeling above your head.
Yeah,
It gets you out.
chakra.
Yeah. Never heard that one before.
Sorry, because it gets you what? It gets you out.
Well, it gets you out of the notion of just being inside what Alan Watts would say, a bag of skin. Like you become aware of your energy field.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's something that I do worry about, like as meditation becomes more mainstream, hoping that the aspects of the spirituality don't also get lost just for like the scientific, very clear-cut medical examples, like what Alan Watts is talking about has such a benefit, and what we just did has such a benefit to people. And it's not necessarily intellectualizable. Mm-hmm. So I personally am a person who would consider himself, and I hate this word because it's so cliche, but a spiritual person.
Yeah.
And when we talk about like the future of meditation, the good thing is more and more people are more and more are getting exposed to meditation, and there's all these companies and apps that are bringing it out into the world. And then the challenge, I think, is how do you keep some of the spirituality in a place where people don't want to build a business around anything that's religious or anything that's quote unquote spiritual. But, I would always say, like, if you take the spirituality out of yoga, it's like taking art and music out of school. And, it's like, I feel like it's kind of the same thing with yoga and meditation. If you take the spirituality out, you're taking all the art out of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, well, I think that's a good lead into the future scenarios. Let's start with the best case.
Best case scenario.
I think the best case scenario would be that all of this buzz that's being created and all of these apps, what they do is they get people started and they give them a taste of what meditation is and what it can be. And then more and more people really dive into meditation, and it is taught in schools, and it's taught as part of a curriculum that everybody is able to do. And the portions of the esoteric and the spiritual are just at least discussed as something that can be, you can take it or leave it.
Right.
And that there is an inclination within humanity to really dive deep within themselves and to recognize that meditation is both math and music. And
that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. And then also that the real benefits of living mindfully are not just getting high. It's also looking at the dark parts of ourselves and illuminating those dark parts with the light of consciousness. So not just using it to say, I'm perfect, I don't need to change anything, but really being like, no, like, oh, wow, okay, I can work on this thing And if I overcome this thing, then my life is going to be blown open. And it's my responsibility, to work on my perfectionism or my arrogance or my own oversensitivity or whatever it is, my
Mm-hmm.
codependence, whatever it is. And just one, one meditation at a time, just shining some light on that, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think the education piece is going to be crucial there. Like a liberal arts education, the reason it's like uses the word liberal is because it's meant to free the mind. Like that was the
Yeah.
original intent. But it seems like now in this day and age, people are more, they care more about what's the salary you're going to get as a result of your education. Like
Yeah.
how are you going to be able to take care of yourself and be, produce more GDP. So I feel like one way that we would make it more likely that we could get into the best case scenario would be if there was some sort of like universal basic income or some policies that made it easier for people to do what they truly love, whether that's, whether that's music or whether that's starting a podcast or whether it's, starting a company or whatever it is. That's one thing that it seems to me that is lacking a lot in American culture. There's just so many people that hate what they do, and it's a
Yeah.
lot harder. It's not that it can't be done, but it's a lot harder to achieve mindfulness when you just really don't enjoy what you do every day. And I guess the other thing I would say for my best
Yeah.
case is like, you mentioned Eckhart Tolle, his book A New Earth. That like the whole thesis of
Yeah.
that book would be the best case scenario, bringing about a higher state of conscious awareness among all humans as sort of a way for us to lead, Mother Earth or Gaia in the right direction without having these low level instinctual fights against each other. Like, yeah, so I'll save like the what could happen in the opposite direction for the worst case, but that's my sense of what would be a great outcome.
I totally agree. Yeah. And man, actually, your podcast, one that I listened to about a year ago, I really started doing a lot of research on UBI. And now
Yeah,
I'm like, I'm a huge believer in it and what Andrew Yang says and what Elon Musk is saying. And now Mark
yeah,
Cuban is even talking about it. And I can't say enough like how I think that people need to be able to have enough of a like if technology isn't freeing us, it's going to enslave us. So the idea that we can use all this technology to give people the ability to have lives where they can pursue something meaningful, and
right.
that doesn't mean easy. It means
Yeah,
meaningful. Like
as
it
long as
means
that's the focus, because right now that's not the focus. It's more of
yeah,
the focus is the external reality.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's so needed, and I think we can't, as human, like all of the, we can't even consider ourselves an intelligent species until we've learned to live in harmony with the planet. I don't think there's
yeah,
anything like we can build all these machines, and we can go fly to the moon, or we could go fly to Mars, and as Eckhart Tolle says, it's all intelligence in the service of madness until we
right.
are learning to live in harmony with the planet. And
Yeah, I
the
mean,
good thing,
when you
no,
compare that intellect to the intelligence that grows your cells, that makes your heart beat, and all of
yeah,
that, it's like it doesn't even compare.
yeah, the immune system, like we
Yeah,
haven't created anything that intelligent. The immune, like our immune systems, they're so intelligent.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, let's talk about the worst case now.
Worst case scenario.
I find it really funny to think about like fistfights on Mars or like I don't know if you've ever seen the show The Expanse, but
Mm-mm.
it's on Amazon now. It's like Jeff Bezos' favorite show, but it's basically this future scenario where we have a colony on Mars, we have Earth, and we have all these people like living on spaceships in like they're called the Belt. But
Yeah,
essentially there's like wars between these three powers. And it's pretty it's pretty awful to think that we could get that far technologically, and yet
Yeah,
we're
yeah, yeah.
still stuck in the same dumb human conflicts of just, having a small circle of people who you identify with, and everyone who's outside of that circle is the other, and therefore they must be, kept under control
Or
and
thought of as fearfully or as the enemy. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So, and it gets even scarier the farther that technology does progress, because another phrase that I love is it's like we're nuclear giants but ethical infants in this country, or
yeah,
in
yeah.
the West especially. And so I guess the worst case scenario would be we keep progressing on all dimensions except for the one that really matters, which is the spiritual dimension or the inner dimension, or just elevating your own level of awareness to habitate that new earth that Eckhart Tolle talks about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think totally. For me, a worst case scenario would be just basically that, like more of the same. And then within meditation, my worst case would be that meditation has its soul sucked out of it, and it's just turned into this cold, you know, completely mathematical formula that
Right.
people are using to become one, to either just to get high, and then
Hmm.
everyone's just sticking their face in their phone and getting high off meditation, and just, not, and only meditating through a machine.
Hmm.
Because that's a huge problem. It's a huge, the addiction to technology is a huge problem. I see it all the time in in my classes, people that like literally like they can't put their phone away from my yoga class. It's like, just put your
I see
freaking
people
phone
in
away.
yoga. Yeah, I see that all the time. I'm amazed. I'm like, why is your
Yeah,
phone right there? And they'll check it during class.
yeah. So the good part about technology is that all these apps are coming out.
Hmm.
But the bad part is you're still looking at your phone. You're still using your damn phone. It's like to meditate, and there has to be a point in which you don't use your phone anymore to meditate, or you use it like once or twice a week, and then you recognize like, okay, like today I'm going to go for a walk in nature with no
Right.
technology, and that'll be my meditation. Like I'm just going to go for a walk in the park for 30 minutes, and that's, so yeah, worst case scenario would be becoming more dependent upon technology, and the soul and the spirit being sucked out, with just the intention to create a quiet mind so that you can focus and go out in the world and make more money. Because
Right. Right.
that's how it's marketed. Just like yoga is marketed as a great workout, and that's great to
Yeah.
get people in the
Or
door.
food is
But
marketed
then,
for its nutrition,
yeah,
and it's like caring about what it'll give you versus what the essence actually is of the experience. And
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, let's talk about the most likely scenario.
Most likely scenario.
Well, I actually feel pretty optimistic here, because I do see this. I mean, if you just look at the numbers, like the number of people who are using meditation apps, like you said, and there is a drawback to that for sure, but it does seem like there is gaining momentum for being more mindful, doing things like meditating and going on yoga retreats and that sort of thing. And I also am encouraged by the fact that the science is proving out the value of it. I mean, I think I read that there's been over 5,000 research studies that have already been published about the benefits of meditation. And I read this book called Altered Traits, which is all about how they did these brain scans of these, Tibetan lamas and pro meditators, and they found that the effective age of their brain was like 20 years younger what the average person was their age.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
I think people really understand the benefits of it, and it is becoming more and more top of mind. It's really just a matter of how it becomes incorporated. Like you said, is it going to be something that's just to get you some results, and you don't really care about what that says about the nature of reality or the interconnectedness of all beings? or are you going to really awaken to almost a higher dimension? Like, it also reminds me of, I love this podcast called The Portal with Eric Weinstein. And he
Oh, I
talked,
love Eric Weinstein.
yeah,
Yeah.
you should check out his new podcast. It's fascinating. But he talks about how if you take any issue, like abortion or gun rights or whatever, there's people who are the hardliners on one side and hardliners on the other. And then there are people who are in the middle. And the middle is not just in between the two, it's actually on a higher dimensional plane where you can see both sides and you understand the drawbacks of both. And it's kind of like what you were saying about how it's like you're reaching up to the heavens, but your roots go all the way down to hell. Like you can, everything can resonate with you because you see things from a higher dimensional perspective. And it's still to be seen if that's what will happen in the future. But I'm fairly optimistic that we are going in that direction. And unless there's some major setback, like, nuclear war or runaway AI or something to that effect, I believe we will get there.
Yeah, I actually really totally agree with you. I think that from what I'm seeing in Bali, the people come here and they are so sincere about wanting to learn how to meditate and wanting to learn how to take better care of themselves and wanting to learn how to live more mindfully, and it's spreading. It's really totally spreading. So I feel really optimistic about that. And then I think that the really big thing is, like, people need to look at they really need to look at technology addiction and cell phone addiction, almost like we looked at cigarette smoking like 15, 20 years ago. I really see it as an issue.
They're all a crutch.
Yeah, your cell phone is a pack of cigarettes, and these social media companies are doing some good, but they're also they're extremely addictive. So that's the one thing that I worry about, is like that people are going to be dependent upon machines to do everything, and the machines are supposed to free us up, and particularly with something like meditation,
right.
But what's happening that's great, that makes me feel like, most likely, is now that all these apps are coming out, you have people that are living in small towns all across America and all across the world. They don't have access to a meditation studio or a meditation teacher. Now they have the technology to be able to join Headspace and then eventually find a teacher online and do privates with them on Skype. Like I do privates on Zoom. I do privates on Skype, and I'm working with people in Australia, or I'm working with somebody in Europe, and that's all because of technology. And these people don't have access to good teachers. So it's all about the balance. It's like you have to be able to find balance. So the thing, I think I agree with you. I'm very optimistic, and we have to address technology addiction as if it's a serious problem, because I see it as being a serious problem. As I'm talking to you through this incredible, it's great, and I would be able to talk to you and look at your face, and what we're doing is beautiful and it's awesome. But then recognizing, okay, like now I'm going to turn all this off and go play guitar for an hour.
Yeah,
and that's good for my soul too,
Totally.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Because I think they said like Gen Z and millennials, like, they're like drinking way less alcohol, using way less drugs than any generation, but there's also really high rates of anxiety and depression.
Right.
Where's that?
They're all sitting on their bed, scrolling through Instagram, wondering what everyone else is doing that's more fun.
Yeah.
Not all, I should say, but yeah, it's a totally different paradigm than when we were growing up. So
yeah.
But you're right that it is far more accessible to take those first steps on your mindfulness journey than it was in the past. So to that effect, it is much easier now to get started.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very happy about that, obviously. Like it's awesome.
Yeah. So tell our listeners, where can people find you? What do you have coming up? Retreats, yoga teacher training?
Yeah. I have a yoga teacher training in May of 2020.
Yeah, I'm like trying to maybe do that. I just gotta work out my American schedule.
Yeah, I was like, should I call him out on the
Dude,
podcast and be like,
I
I hope
really
you
want to do
come.
it. I'm gonna
You'd
try to make it
absolutely
happen.
love it.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know I will.
yeah. So hence the future. I think that hence the future of Mattimore Cronin. I see you as a yoga teacher or a meditation teacher in a couple of years. I could see you.
Dude,
I could always. Byron and I talk
I would
about
love
that.
it.
We could see you as a teacher. Yeah. So teacher training in May. I have an incredible yoga retreat in Santorini, Greece, in June of next year. And then you can always just come to Bali, come to the yoga barn, check out my classes. And
where can they find you online?
Yeah. My Instagram is Teodo, Teodo, yoga guitar. And I also have a Spotify account with my guitar music. And I mean, you can just put I have a YouTube account. I have all this stuff, like online
I
classes.
listen to your music in traffic all the time, even still. So I definitely recommend it.
Thanks, man. I have another album coming out. It's already recorded. We just got to work on the post-production. So I have another 10 songs. Hopefully in the next 2 months, they'll be out.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Dude, well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been the future of mindfulness. Thank you to our listeners as well.
What has happened,
See you guys
what
next
is
time.
currently happening,
Thank you.
and what will inevitably happen.
The past, the present, and the future.
Our computer is picking up a strange signal.
The past, the present, and the future, baby.
What's the world coming to?
The past, the present, and the future. The past, the present, and the future, baby. The past, the present, and the future.
Will attempt to stimulate consciousness.
The past, the present, and the future, baby.
Behind the strange signal is an alien
The
intelligence.
past, the present, and the future. The past, the present, and the future, baby.
It's possible.
Hey Futurists, if you've made it this far, you might be wondering who created the Hence the Future theme song. It was created by the Walden Brothers, and you can find them on Spotify. The Walden Brothers also produced the sound bites for the worst case, the best case, and the most likely future scenarios. At Hence the Future, we're always looking for ways to improve the quality of our episodes and our predictions. To that end, we're building a team of researchers to curate the most authoritative and highly vetted sources as the foundation for every episode. If you'd like to support these efforts, you can donate a small monthly amount at anchor.fm/hencethefuture. And if you haven't done so already, please rate and review the podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. We appreciate your support.